Every year, millions of people run 42 kilometers and 195 meters, thinking they are repeating the feat of the ancient Greek hero Pheidippides, who died shouting, "We have won." This video is about why that's not true, and why the real history of the marathon is far more surprising, mythical, and even absurd. We are used to believing that the marathon was born out of great heroism, Pheidippides, battle, Athens, victory, death, a legend that underpins all Olympic grandeur. But in reality, nobody died. And if anyone ran at all, it wasn't to Athens. And the name wasn't even correct. And the distance we know today was invented on a whim by a British queen, so her children could watch the start of the race from their window. Yes, it's true. I've read Herodotus, Plutarch, Lucian, and Browning's poetry. And here's what I discovered. The messenger in ancient Greece spoke with a god. The winner of the first marathon drank wine and still finished, and one woman did not let herself be thrown off the course during the run. Now you will learn why the real Pheidippides ran to Sparta, not Athens, who invented the scene of the heroic death, how the marathon distance is connected to a window at Windsor Castle, why this myth was born not in Hellas, but in Victorian England, and how two young women in hoodies changed marathon rules forever. Are you ready to forget everything you thought you knew about the marathon? We've all heard the story about how a brave ancient Greek warrior named Pheidippides ran nearly 40 kilometers from Marathon to Athens, announced the victory to his fellow citizens, and died. But there's a nuance. That scene does not appear in Herodotus, the ancient historian who gave us the most authoritative account of the Greco-Persian Wars. In Herodotus's histories, Pheidippides indeed runs, but not to Athens, to Sparta, and not to announce victory, but to plead for help. A massive Persian army was heading toward Athens. The citizens of the great city understood how slight were their chances of victory. The Persian force was far larger than the Athenian one, so they sent a runner to Sparta, specially trained to cover long distances. As Herodotus writes, Athenians in great danger decided to call for the help of the Spartans and sent the herald Pheidippides to Sparta. The distance between Athens and Sparta is about 240 kilometers. No asphalt, no navigation, across rough mountainous terrain, suffering from September heat. Yet, according to Herodotus, Pheidippides reached Sparta the next day. The Spartans refused to help. Actually, they agreed, but only after their festival to honor the gods had ended. Pheidippides heard the refusal and ran back. By the way, today there's a race that tries to recreate exactly that route, the Spartathlon, 246 kilometers long. Inspired by Herodotus's tale, in 1982, 5 British officers decided to run this route, and 3 of them managed it to the end. Every year since, people have run the Spartathlon, which is of course a much tougher challenge than the marathon, yet far less known. There's no beautiful story behind it, just a real messenger running through mountains and forests. But even that story has its mythical component. Along the way, Pheidippides reportedly encountered the god Pan. Pheidippides claimed that while he was running alone and exhausted over mountain trails, a god appeared before him. It was Pan, a creature with goat's legs, horns, and a strange sense of humor, the god of woods, fields, of nature, and also of panic. Yes, that word comes from his name. And, as it turns out, quite easily offended. According to Herodotus, Pan appeared before Pheidippides in the forests of Arcadia, through which his route to Sparta passed, and posed an unexpected question. Why don't the Athenians worship him? Why have they forgotten him? In his view, he was helping them. Pheidippides, obviously, passed on this conversation to his fellow citizens, and later in Athens, they did actually build a sanctuary to Pan. They couldn't let the god feel slighted by their city. This strange detail, hardly ever remembered, completely changes the story. We're left with true fantasy. Picture this: Pheidippides alone at dusk, crickets chirping, trees rustling, and suddenly Pan steps from the shadows. Here we see how vastly different the ancient Greek world was from ours, how close they constantly lived with magical powers. But there's one more very interesting detail for our story. The ancient historian never said Pheidippides died after the run. That particular story emerged much later. The most famous episode of the whole marathon story, the shout, "We have won," and death on the spot. But, as I have already mentioned, Herodotus said nothing of the kind. The first account of the runner's death appears only 500 years after the battle by another ancient historian, Plutarch, living at the end of the 1st and beginning of the 2nd century AD. He, however, wrote that a man who ran after the Battle of Marathon to Athens was called Eucles, and he supposedly just cried, "Rejoice," and died. A completely different story, a completely different ending, but the imagination didn't stop there. Soon, Lucian of Samosata appears, a 2nd century writer known for his ironic, satirical works. He helped shape the elevated legend. Lucian also mentions a man who, after victory, ran to Athens and died. But now his name is once again Pheidippides, or Philippides. The text of Lucian exists in different variants. And now Pheidippides cries, "We have won," and drops dead. Who ran, Eucles or Pheidippides? From where? When? Why? The details grow more colorful. The tale is based not on facts, but on emotions. The death scene is a powerful finale, a real emotional punch, a true myth, and no coincidence that this fantastical plot, created by ancient writers, was picked up by a Victorian-era poet. 19th century, a world full of romance, heroism, national pride, and grand words. It was then that British poet Robert Browning wrote the poem Pheidippides. In Browning's version, Pheidippides is no longer just a runner. He's a superhuman. He first runs to Sparta, then back. Then he takes part in the Battle of Marathon. And later, exhausted but inspired by victory, he runs to Athens to deliver the news. And little wonder that after such feats he drops dead, shouting, "Athens is saved!" Browning's poem ends thus: "So is Pheidippides happy forever, the noble, strong man who could race like a god, bear the face of a god, whom a god loved so well. He saw the land saved he had helped to save, and was suffered to tell such tidings, yet never decline, but gloriously as he began, so to end gloriously, once to shout, thereafter be mute. Athens is saved. Pheidippides dies in the shout for his meed." And of course, this version, which combined various ancient accounts, began to be perceived as the true one. It was so beautiful. Who cares about plausibility when it comes to heroism? And 17 years after Browning's poem had been published, the world was captivated by another lofty idealistic project. Pierre de Coubertin proposed reviving the ancient Olympic Games. Let modern people, not professionals but amateurs, compete and show their strength and agility. Let the world admire strong, well-developed people. And the memory of Pheidippides, not the real one, but the one Browning imagined, fit perfectly. Thus, marathon race became an Olympic sport. But the first winner was not a superhero, but a mere water carrier who drank wine along the way. The first modern Olympic Games took place, of course, in Athens in 1896. And for Greeks, who had been freed from the Ottoman Empire just a few decades earlier, every participant in the Olympics was a hero. But the marathon, a race tied to memories of Hellas's greatness, who would win it? A Greek by the name of Spiridon Lewis was just a regular guy who delivered water to villages in a cart. He had no special sports achievements before 1896. But on Marathon Day, everything changed. 17 participants started the race, almost all of them Greeks. But the favorites, Frenchman Le Musio and Australian Flack, broke away at once. Lewis was somewhere in the middle. But today we know that one of the most important tasks of a marathoner is not to burst out too fast, but to pace himself. And so the favorites dropped out one after another, and Lewis kept going, calmly, confidently. Along the route, he was cheered by his countrymen. According to legend, on the way he went into a tavern and drank a glass of wine. Or, according to another version, his girlfriend gave him an orange, and his future father-in-law let him take a sip of cognac. Lewis finished first. In the final stretch, he was flanked by 2 Greek princes, Constantine and George. The royal family wanted to emphasize what Lewis's victory meant for all of Greece. When Lewis crossed the finish line at the Panathenaic Stadium, the crowd literally went wild. He was showered with gifts: a horse, a watch, boots, free haircuts for life. The king himself asked, "What do you want?" And Lewis replied, "A cart with a donkey to carry water." He did not become a great athlete, did not go into advertising or politics, just returned to his life. And in Greek, a phrase appeared, to become a Lewis, meaning to run so fast, you vanish from sight. But how long did Lewis run? 42 kilometers, 195 meters. You confidently answer, and you'd be wrong. During preparation for the first Olympics, it was decided to make the marathon distance equal to the length of the road that Pheidippides supposedly ran from Marathon to Athens. He had to go around Mount Pentelicus, and in 1896, 2 roads circled it, one longer, about 40 kilometers, the shorter, about 35. Scholars, however, decided that in the time of the marathon battle, only the longer road existed. Therefore, at the first modern Olympics, the marathon distance was exactly 40 kilometers. But then, the British Queen intervened. 1908. The Olympic Games take place in London. Organizers decide that it would be elegant to start the marathon from Windsor Castle, where the royal family resides. But that's not enough. According to legend, Queen Alexandra requested to have the race start directly beneath the children's bedroom windows. She wanted her children to watch the start of the marathon, and so it was done. The runners started under the windows of Windsor Castle and finished in London at White City Stadium, again in a spot convenient for the royals, directly in front of the royal box. The result was a strange number, 26 miles and 385 yards, or 42 kilometers and 195 meters, neither round nor symbolic. It just happened. At that time, nothing was yet set in stone, and at subsequent Olympics, the distance changed several times. In 1912, it was 40.2 kilometers. In 1920, it was 42.75. Only in 1921 did the International Amateur Athletic Federation fix the now familiar distance. And today, when you hear 42 kilometers, 195 meters, it refers not to the ancient road from Marathon Field to Athens, but to the path from the window of the prince's nursery to the royal box at the stadium. That's the distance marathoners still run. And for many decades, they were men only. And women. Women were literally thrown out of the sport, sometimes quite literally. Here's a scene that looks like it's from a movie, but it isn't. It's Boston, 1967, and a true struggle for the right simply to run. Kathrine Switzer was 20, and she wanted to participate in one of the most popular and prestigious marathon races. The Boston Marathon had been held since 1897, so right after the 1896 Athens Olympics. Today, running this race is still the dream of marathoners worldwide. But of course, women were not allowed. Strictly speaking, the rules didn't explicitly forbid it, but everyone understood that no fragile creature could run such a distance. And all women are so fragile and weak. In 1966, Bobby Gibb tried to register for the marathon but was refused and adapted by simply blending into the crowd at the start, pulling a hoodie over her head, and ran the distance, posting a quite decent result. Bobby ran again in 1967, again without registration. But her achievements were overshadowed by the scandal in 1967 around Kathrine Switzer. Kathrine wanted her run to be officially registered, so she submitted an application under her own name. But not as Kathrine Virginia, but as K.V. Switzer. She paid the entry fee, and her friend obtained bib number 261 for her. On race day, she also started in a hoodie, with the hood on. Everything was fine, until the hood came off and the organizers realized this is a woman. What happened next was wild. One of the chief organizers, Jock Semple, was riding alongside in the press vehicle. Jock was known for his quick temper and treating the marathon as sacred. Seeing Kathrine, he flew out in rage, shouting, "Get the hell out of my race and give me those numbers," and tried to rip the number off her. A photographer captured this shameful moment of Jock Semple trying to pull Kathrine's bib. Kathrine's coach, who ran alongside her, tried to stop Semple, but he pushed him away. But Kathrine's boyfriend, Tom Miller, also running with her, stepped in and shoulder-checked Semple, knocking him to the ground. So Kathrine was able to run on and finish. Incidentally, like Bobby Gibb, her time was even better, that results of many male participants. A few years later, women were officially allowed to enter marathons. Jock Semple changed his view and even became friends with Kathrine Switzer. And in Boston, they no longer issue Bibby number 261. It was permanently retired in honor of Kathrine Switzer. Later, she founded the NGO 261 Fearless, an organization that helps women feel their potential and power through running. So here's how things stand. Pheidippides ran to another city. Nobody died. The death scene was invented 500 years later. The poet wrote the final version. The first marathon winner drank wine and asked for a donkey cart as a gift. And the race length was decided by a queen, so her children could see the start from their window, and the marathon became an arena of women's rights struggle, decided by a shoulder push and a hoodie falling off. Today's marathon is based on many inventions and strange twists of fate, but instead of an ancient legend, we got something new, a story of real people testing their strength in a grueling challenge. The marathon is first and foremost a test of human endurance. But whether you run it yourself or watch runners from a comfortable armchair, don't forget Spiridon Lewis, who drank wine on the way to the finish, the queen who cared about her children, and brave women who defended their right to run.